Studios, brought to you by Old Mutual.
Awesome. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me again.
Thank you. Q, working in SAMRO, what is your proudest achievement yet and why?
Proudest achievement yet. I think, it's very hard to pick one thing. So I'll go with something that's actually, covering everything. One of the proudest achievements is that I've been able to take SAMRO to over $500 million in revenues for the first time ever. So in the report, the financial report that's going to come out for the year ended 2020, June 2020, we're going to be able to report that we've just over the 500 million rand mark, and that's something that hasn't been achieved before, and it's very special to me because it's something that I had really wanted to do to have a really big impact on that top line, and that's happened. I'm very proud of that.
For those that are just tuning in, we are going to delve down to that specific topic about SAMRO and the money and how does the money flow. But I think it's so important to give context when we're speaking to someone like yourself who brings gravitas to the table in our 10th year. You talked about that money that you've managed to raise. What has been the lesson and the success that drove you to be able to raise that amount of revenue for the organization?
It's been a number of things. I think one of the main things that I picked up when I joined the licensing team in Feb 2019, we picked up that a lot of our licensees weren't being listened to. A lot of our prospective revenue lines weren't being spoken to in a way that showed understanding of their businesses, that showed understanding of their challenges, and assisting them in understanding what we represent, who we represent, and why it's so important to take out a license with SAMRO. So I just started with the basics, having real conversations with people and showing them that SAMRO isn't just, a tax man that's here to, take a slice of your money and walk away with it. It's actually, an organization that's doing many things at once. And one thing is it's giving you peace of mind to use the music in your store, on your online radio, on your broadcast, etc., with the peace of mind that everybody's music, all the composers have been covered there. It's giving you peace of mind that you don't have to speak to every single person who wrote every single song that you'll be playing or using as a music user, and we've covered all of that in one license. And at the same time, the license is structured in a way that isn't meant to prejudice you being able to be a sustainable business. It's not meant to take away from your going concern. So those are the types of things that we dug into, and we try to let people understand and illustrate to them that's what we stand for.
I mean, the industry in terms of employment numbers is relatively small if we look at it from a global point of view. Who do you look to and look up to for inspiration, whether it be on a South African scale or on a global scale, where you say, oh, wow, these are really good thought leaders that I need to follow and look at?
It's funny, I look at everybody. There are people who make mistakes, there are people who do well. And being in this position, I get to speak to really large players in the game. I get to speak to, the CFO at the SABC, who's been a really good, let's say, companion in trying to get us, those license fees paid. As you know, they had their bailout and the whole discussion leading to that, and how SAMRO was taken care of, even as you've seen in articles written.
Q, just to interrupt quickly, for the global viewer, the SABC, the South African Broadcast Corporation, that's the national broadcaster that we have in South Africa.
Yeah. So having conversations with stakeholders such as those have really given me good insight into into the industry. Speaking to all my broadcasters, I follow them on social media. I'm on their Twitter, I'm on their Facebook, I'm on their Instagram. Being able to engage and be part of forums like Music Exchange, it also exposes me to so many different industry players and different leaders. Being able to partake in CSAC meetings, CSAC being the confederation that represents all CMOs, CMOs being collective management organizations such as SAMRO. CSAC has a lot of players and people who have decades of experience in the role that I'm in and in other roles within a CMO that I get to learn from. I engage. I subscribe to a lot of newsletters, Music Business Weekly, and it's not just about the music or entertainment industry. You have to understand everything else that's around it, especially in my role, where most of our licensees derive their income from advertising. So you have to understand the economic landscape to see whether people will be spending on advertising or not.
We're going to get to that question. It's right up down the line. How does this money flow? But artists have always been creative in 2020 and going forward. How important is it for them actually to understand the business side, what we are talking about today, as opposed to just having great musical chops and musical skill?
Yeah. Do you mind asking that question again? Sorry, Martin.
The musical skill. Artists normally say I just play music. I don't need to understand the business, but the business is so important. Is that more important than ever today? I
think, it's always been very important. And I think it seems like it's more important than ever now, where the importance hasn't changed. But the tools to allow you to understand what your music does for you have become stronger and more transparent, with all these reports and insights being given on, DSPs like Spotify or SoundCloud or YouTube. Everybody can see all the numbers. Whereas before, people would say, my song's #1 on the radio. You don't know how many spins it's gotten. You don't know which radio station it played on, and you don't know what kind of revenue you can expect against that. But with the advent of the digital revolution, there's so many insights that you could take from and actually take advantage. So it allows, musicians have always been, for me, like entrepreneurs or freelancers or consultants. I could consult with you as an accountant and say I'm an accountant, but I'm also accountable to myself in understanding how I actually get business out of you, how I can expand more business, how I can scale and be out there. And I think, musicians have always had the responsibility, but now it's just like everything is right in front of you. How could you not? You'd have to ignore it now, rather than before, when you actually have to seek the information. Now it's right in front of you. You have to ignore it, and it would definitely be your fault if you're not taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you.
Let's get the definitive answer from someone who is at the cutting edge at SAMRO. Who does SAMRO represent? Let's clear that once and for all so people can understand. Because there's SAMRO, there's Capasso, there's RISA, and there's sometimes confusion within the artist's understanding of the business landscape.
Yeah. Well, SAMRO represents composers, authors, and publishers. And I know that means nothing to a lot of people. So essentially, we talk about a song that everybody knows. I know it's not a South African song, but I think it's relatable for everybody, which is Whitney Houston's "I'll Always Love You," which was made famous by her movie The Bodyguard. So it was a song that was written by Dolly Parton, and sung and popularized to, my generation, especially, by Whitney Houston. The song in itself was, the lyrics, the composition, the melody, is what SAMRO would represent. It doesn't matter who can sing the song. DJ Maporisa can put it onto a Mapiano beat. You can have Lockenville remix it and have it sung by R.J. Benjamin, and anything can happen with the song. But the composition in itself, wherever it goes, will still be represented by SAMRO. The performance of the song is what will be represented by SAMPRA, because they represent the recording of the music, being the person who went into the studio and took the lyrics and sang them. But whoever wrote the music gets represented by SAMRO, and we make sure, even if it's performed on a world stage and Dolly Parton's not there, but Whitney Houston or whoever else would have been there, then SAMRO is still collecting on behalf of the original writer and composer of that music work.
Fabulous. The Benjamins, as some people call it, the money. How does that flow work? And how do you collect in terms of the payment cycle? And then I'd like to drill down in the second part of the discussion. When you look at the major radio stations, the major broadcasters in South Africa, I use, for example, here the Metro FM, the 5FM, and then the independent commercial stations like Highveld and KFM. If you could just explain that ecosystem to the audience.
Okay, so it's a really broad ecosystem. The money flows from many different directions. Majority, maybe 66% of the money that flows through to SAMRO is from broadcasters, being TV and radio broadcasters. And generally, their tariffs are linked to the music usage. So, for example, radios make money from advertising in some events, but majority, at least 90% of their money comes from advertising, and they sell that advertising based on the attention that people give to their radio programs, and they capture that attention using predominantly musical content. So effectively, they are using music to get revenue, and because they use music that belongs to composers that SAMRO represents, we charge a tariff against that. It'll be similar for a concert. You're getting people to pay for tickets so that they can hear music. Even in a movie, their musical scores, you wouldn't have had a Black Panther without all the musical scores that represented the South African or African music landscape or feel. So all of those music usages have a tariff that is linked to it. Sometimes it's percentage based and sometimes it's a fixed tariff. For example, a restaurant isn't predominantly about music, so it'll be about how they keep people in the restaurant and spend through music in itself. So bringing it back to the radios, for example, I'm getting a message that my internet is unstable. I'm not sure if you're getting the same thing.
No, we're going along nicely.
We're all good. All right. So going back to the radio stations, for example, a 5FM would be licensed at a specific tariff. Let's say for the sake of our conversation, at 2% of their revenue. What would happen is they would give us their advertising revenue every single month, and we would then apply our tariff against that. We'd give an invoice to them based on that, and that would happen continuously over the year. At the end of the year.
Now, roughly, you're talking about a percentage as a very, very ballpark figure. Those major commercial radio stations with inordinate amount of listenerships. What would one spin translate to in terms of an artist who has written a song? Would it be 5 Rand in their pocket, 4 Rand in their pocket? What would it be roughly that you've had a look at based on the last 10 years?
I would love to give you an answer to that, but I think that's a question that's better suited for my colleagues Karabosina, who I know you'll have a conversation with,
Absolutely.
if not already. He speaks to the members directly. He has the distribution reports in front of him, and it's a detail that I haven't necessarily really paid attention to. So I don't think I'll be able to give an accurate answer on that.
Turning to community radio, there are a tremendous amount of them in South Africa. How does the licensing and the money flow work from that? Are they on, because their advertising revenue is so much lower, do they get a standard tariff, or how does that work?
So the tariff for community radio is different to the commercial radio, and because it's designed in a completely different manner, and you'd find that community radios work more on sponsorships and donations than advertising, so that will be built into the tariff as well. And because of the value of the license, we'd invoice community radios once a year in comparison to the monthly invoicing that would happen with the commercial radio stations, because the cash flow burden isn't so much on them, because the value of the license is that low. Obviously, it's a different story with very successful commercial radio stations such as Hot 91.9.
Now, there was a thing on a TV program, Carte Blanche, a couple of months ago, where an artist had queries and says there was underreporting and overreporting, and there's been the rise of these apps like Radio Monitor and F Stereo, which can monitor the data, and I presume they get that off the ISRC code, to say my song by Martin Myers is played 10 times on Little Radio Station 1. When artist Martin Myers has a query about Little Song number 1, is that data from a company like Radio Monitor and F Stereo, can that be presented to SAMRO and saying, look, there is a query here in terms of the song says it's played 10 times. How does that work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to give context to anybody who's watching, especially the artists, obviously, when SAMRO distributes, we distribute for radio usage every year in February. That's when our primary distribution takes place. And with the distribution, you'll get the money in your bank account. And as a SAMRO member, you'll either be emailed or be able to access your statement of usage from the SAMRO portal. So that'll give a detail of this specific song played this many times on this radio station, and this is the value that you got from the total number, and this is the rate per play. And if you then go to Radio Monitor and say, but Radio Monitor says my song got played 30 times, whereas your report or statement says it got played 5 times, we need to resolve that. By all means, you are able to bring that in, and our rights holder services team will review that along with our distributions team and compare and validate whether that information is correct. And should SAMRO have not received the correct information from the radio station, or be confirmed that actually what you forwarded is what should have been used, then you'll rightfully be compensated for the difference.
But I mean, the beautiful thing here, what you are driving home very clearly is it's for the artist to sort out his laundry at home and make sure his checks and balances are in place. So he could use quite comfortably Radio Monitor or F Stereo. Would both apply, or is one more important than the other in terms of the monitoring, if they were going to do that?
I mean, I wouldn't be able to say, but I think whatever independent information you have, you should bring. If, for example, you knew your song was going to be used a lot on let's say Heritage Day, you could record Mnet or Mzansi Magic or what have you, whatever channel or radio program. You could record the whole day of that and bring it to SAMRO and say, here's this recording, my song played 50 times, why are you saying? Or just make sure that it's captured properly, or if it's in hindsight, just say, why are you saying it's only been played this many times? So whatever source you have for the reporting, you should bring it forward. We'd gladly interrogate it.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that. Q, could we move on to the pandemic and this astronomic rise of all of a sudden live streaming? How does the revenue work around that? Roles and responsibilities of the artist, roles and responsibilities of the promoter, and then roles and responsibilities of the host. We have ticketing companies, hosting online, on demand. Who is responsible for what? For paying the composers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, and thanks for raising this. I think it mirrors quite a lot. Like, if it's a live streaming concert, it would be the same as if it's a concert held at Grand West or, at the Ticket Pro Dome. There's a venue, the host being the infrastructure. There's a promoter being, whoever might have put all those artists together, and then there's the artist. So it should be licensed. The difference is it is also being streamed or live streamed onto platforms that have a partial license. But this shouldn't be confused to say because YouTube is licensed with SAMRO that I can have my live stream on YouTube and it's all fine. The license with YouTube only covers for user-generated content and not live streaming and not paid content or pre-paid content, etc.
Just explain user-generated content. Just define it for our audience.
So user-generated content is I'm going to record myself playing soccer. I'm going to put a backtrack onto that and I upload it onto YouTube. Or I'm at a wedding and I'm recording my friends who've just gotten married, having their first dance, and there's music playing in the background. That's user-generated content. Once you are using the music or using the platform for commercial gains, whether it's advertising or whether it's sold, you'd have to obtain a license for that. So we've worked with Capasso, because we work with Capasso on our online licensing deals very closely, to make it easier for the music users, to find a one-stop solution for their licensing. And we've developed a very good tariff that allows promoters and hosts to be licensed. So primarily, I would say the host needs to license and pass that cost on to the promoter. Make it very easy for them, because the infringement would be on the host's website. For example, the Ticket Pro Dome has its platform, and I know that you guys have used it for Plasipo as well. And they've approached us, to get a license, and then it's something that then I don't have to engage with each promoter, because then they've taken care of that, and then they've passed that cost on to each of the promoters to say, hey, out of the cost per ticket sale, you're going to have to pay this percentage to Capasso and SAMRO in order to cover for the usage on this website. So one of the things that I get asked a lot is, what if the artists are performing their own music? Like I said, with who we represent, you'd find that RJ had written the song and he's performing a song, or he's performing songs from his own album. It doesn't mean that he owns all the rights to those songs. It doesn't mean that he wrote all those songs on his own. And also, he's given a mandate to SAMRO to represent him on all platforms, and that includes platforms that he's put himself on. So through that mandate, we are then obligated to license the platform where his music will be used, even if it's used by him. So the license is necessitated for any type of live streaming event that's going to involve music, or else you'll find yourself at a risk of, takedown or copyright infringement lawsuits against you.
Talking about copyright infringement, there's been a rise of a number of tribute shows. People have done tributes to iconic artists, particularly during Women's Month, who've passed away. Say, for example, Aretha Franklin comes to mind. She passed away in August. And you did a tribute show. Would the performers have to go to the publisher to get clearance to do those songs? What would the process be to avoid being taken down?
Yeah, so the performers, from a publishing perspective, they can get clearance from the license that they would obtain from SAMRO and Capasso. Should it then be more of a a commercial video, then they'd have to get the rights from the publishers directly, and then it becomes a sync deal. But if it's just, I want to have maybe Judith Supuma and other artists give a tribute to Aretha Franklin, then they get the rights through the license that SAMRO and Capasso would give, because then the performance in itself and the money collected from that license would then be distributed back to the rights holders who would be looking after Aretha Franklin's musical assets.
We're looking at South Africa, and you've been involved with Music Exchange for a number of years. Let's look a year out from now to 2021. What would the messaging you'd like to get across from a SAMRO point of view, challenges that you see, and the changing South African music landscape? Where do you see that going?
It's a loaded question.
I like them. I like them.
I know. It's a very challenging question. I see it going in many different ways. I see the music industry growing in many different ways, one of which is growing in frustration because of the lack of support and the lack of structure in the industry as a whole. And it's not just independent artists that are suffering with this. It's also, the large labels that are also struggling with this, and there isn't a level of cohesion that allows everybody to partake and benefit from this system. So I see a lot more people being outspoken. I mean, we saw, it wasn't a riot necessarily, but the protests in Durban about opening up the industry. And I mean, that's a call that would respond to the fact that there hasn't been enough in terms of, the relief funds, etc. We can go back to level one. There's still going to be social distancing with limited numbers at shows, etc. And what's the plan, for the artists, and who's meant to speak for them? A lot of people come to SAMRO and say we're supposed to do that, but SAMRO is doing its job. The best we can do, and the resources that are allocated to us are to actually make sure that everybody's licensed. And then we're distributing that money to the people whose music was used within those license parameters. And I think we're going to see more outspokenness from our artists, and I think it's going to create some kind of change in the industry that's going to create a lot more cohesion, a lot more united movement in specific directions. I don't know what kind of body is going to represent that going forward, but I think there's going to be a demand for artists and music to be paid for what it's worth. I mean, for example, the three societies in the US that are similar to SAMRO, and one of them distributes and licenses $1 billion worth of distributions to their artists. $1 billion. That's like 15 billion rand. I think that's bigger than the whole music industry, or I wouldn't say entertainment industry in South Africa. But so I know I'm speaking about this and responding in a more political way, rather than just speaking on what kind of trends and changes I anticipate. But I think a lot more people are going to take things into their own hands. We're going to see a lot more independent artists coming out, a lot more usage and taking advantage of the social media assets to popularize themselves. And I think we're going to have a lot more attention from international players on the continent, because people will be driving their own success. I mean, there's a success story.
We're going to talk about that success story. It starts with a J, Jerusalem, 100 million views. But would you like to see, there was Claudie Motsoneng, former head of the SABC, and the local content changing. I've written letters on behalf of Music Exchange, the constituency, to try and change that, to see the rise of playlists and the streaming landscape. Would you like to see that happening? in the radio space in South Africa? Because that's one immediate area where change can be affected to affect the artist's pocket down the line in that 8-9 months window if they've written work.
This is what I think needs to happen, Martin. I think, you had a whole lot of excuses when Cloudy, had put that forward. We're losing listeners, advertising is dropping, etc., etc. A lot of excuses. If you listen, if you walk down the street, if you listen, if you look at the charts, if you look at the most downloaded music, if you look at the street culture in South Africa, Jerusalem being one example, but if you look at the new genres and you look at the new types of dances and culture that's brewing in South Africa, that's all local stuff. You don't see people overdosing on international content, and I want to see radio stations looking at that data that's not on their radio stations, and want to see TV broadcasters looking at their data that what are people watching on YouTube, what are people watching on Facebook Watch, what are people watching on TikTok, on Instagram TV, and translating that and putting it into the screens in front of us, because that's what we're looking for. The most trending and the highest watched episode on TV, I think it was We Are Jola 99, which is, a very random Moja Love TV show that's only 2 years old. But it's gained so much popularity because Black people and South African people and want to see themselves. And I challenge people in TV, people in radio to actually use that data to say this is what we need to be putting on our commercial radio stations, because that's where the attention, where the eyeballs are, and we'll still be able to capture the LSMs 7 to 10 and the relating advertising revenue from that. I think I would challenge them to do that. Why should it be a law when it's actually business? Commercially, you can see it's working.
I agree with you so strongly, because it helps the ecosystem and keeping the money within the confines of the country. Because when we do go back to next year to be able to have concerts, those artists need an audience, and radio helps build that audience by bringing their music to the fore. How do we impress upon the commercial entities that this is the way to go? It's an onward slog to try and change that narrative.
A good question. All the advertising brands that they're losing out on, where is it going? It's going to Google, it's going to YouTube, it's going to Facebook, it's going to TikTok. What's happening on those platforms? What are people in South Africa looking at? Compete. You're being disrupted. How are you going to respond? I think that's where they need to look. The numbers are there, information is there, and change what you're doing to align with what people are going out for.
I mean, I look at this conference. We're in our 10th year. It's now become a global conference.
Yeah.
It just happens to be, we're talking out of Cape Town. I'm talking to you in Johannesburg. But anybody can log on anytime on demand and watch these conversations and see what is happening in the powerhouse in Africa, at the tip of Africa.
100%.
Talk about your personal preferences in music that you've seen coming through in the last couple of months. What are you listening to, and where should people perhaps go and look if they haven't looked at this artist and go, hang on, this is under the radar, but it's going to explode?
What am I listening to? Oh, God. I don't think I've had an opportunity to listen to much lately. I've been so busy with work. But a few local artists that I've been listening to a lot are Focalistic, who's made some waves recently. There's the 1020 Cartel that's just come out with an amazing album. It's such a mood. I play it all weekend. It keeps me mellow and it keeps me rooted. I think there's also Capital B with a very little known artist, but coming out with music almost every second week. I'm listening to a lot of Amapiano, obviously. So all the different playlists that are coming out. There's Maporisa, there's Kabza the Small, there's MFR Soul, really good songs that are coming out there. And I'm also listening to a lot of Black Diamond. I think it's a new artist out of Ambitious Entertainment, coming out with a very fresh take on, you know, a Maskandi kind of sound, kind of vibe, and mixing it with an urban R&B, hip hop kind of sound, and it's almost similar to what Wizkid and Burna Boy are doing with the Nigerian sound, and I think it's going to grow pretty well. So that's where I'm vibing. And, there's a lot more.
Finally,
very eclectic playlist.
Fabulous, but that's what the industry is about. Finally, looking at a crystal ball, the rise of streaming. Radio was always so important for breaking artists, particularly in South Africa. People listen to radio for a long period of time. Is streaming going to catch up and be, maybe that's the way to break an artist? How do you see it?
Definitely. I mean, Martin, if you look at Drake's numbers, right? I mean, he can decide to release a song at midnight tonight, and for that song to get onto radio, to be looked at by the programming and playlisting committees, and for it to be okayed and all of that stuff. And also on top of that, to create a radio edit for a song that's already buzzing and it's already trending. I think social media and I think the digital service providers are going to be the way to break songs. The virality that comes out of that is so much stronger than radio. You know, premiering on radio is great because you get a huge audience all at once, but premiering online, your audience can, it's like an avalanche. It can snowball into something massive within a matter of minutes.
I mean, we've covered such a large area in the time that we've chatted, and it's moved very, very quickly. Closing remarks, your doors are open. People have this perception, that SAMRO is against the artist, which you've alluded to so clearly in our discussion. No, we're here to assist. What closing would you like to say to artists sitting and watching in whatever part of the globe, from a SAMRO perspective?
I mean, from a SAMRO perspective, I think, follow us on social media, engage, understand what music trends mean, what music trends are, and how they impact you. Understand what SAMRO represents and is here to do. Because you'll be frustrated if you're asking for things that aren't, aren't within our mandate. Also, take advantage of our online tools. If you're a SAMRO member, get onto the portal, understand it, click around, download statements, get help from somebody if you don't understand it. And I'm a self-help kind of guy. I think I move quicker because I don't stand in a queue waiting for people to interact with me. I get online, I dive in. In my family, I think, or in my peers also, I'm one of the first people to download any new app that'll come out. So I'd say to people, stay alert, put yourself out there, get as much information as you can all the time, and engage with SAMRO. I mean, we've got a small team. We've got a company with almost 200 people, speaking to 20,000 licensees and representing, tens of thousands of members. I think over 30,000 members internationally. So I think it's a very big job, and sometimes you might have to wait a while to get a response, but at the same time, it's no excuse. We're working on things. We're getting things quicker. We're trying to improve our technology as well to make ourselves service the people much better.
You mentioned earlier sometimes it takes time to respond on that. What should artists understand? What is a good turnaround time? 5 working days, 6 working days, when they then can come back to you and say, look, please, you haven't picked up on this query that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 5 to 10 working days. And once you've got a relationship with somebody, hold on to that. Anybody who's busy and inundated with stuff. I mean, let's say, for example, you're waiting at a Checkers and you're about to pay for your groceries, and maybe the 3 trolleys in front of you and they're all full. By the time you get to the teller, if you're going to tell her about how your trolley's full and you've been waiting, etc., I mean, they've been working. They haven't been sitting, polishing their nails. They've been working. So manage the relationship. So to respond to you, 5 to 10 working days. But once you've gotten that relationship with somebody, that first person to respond to you, treat them with kindness, and you'll be prioritized, I'm sure. I'm the same. I'm on the other side. I deal with licensees and not members necessarily. So I'm the person who sends the cold email to somebody who'd be head of marketing or operations at a broadcaster. So they don't want to pay me. They don't want to deal with me. But I cultivate a relationship that opens them up to me.
Final question, and we chatted about it earlier, and you mentioned you have a wonderful relationship with the financial officer from the SABC, and there's been in the press years this backwards and forwards. Can you just update us as to the progress of the SABC SAMRO relationship and how that is happening in terms of payment, if anything is still outstanding?
So what was reported last year in terms of when we were waiting for the bailout, etc., we had a payment arrangement, and they met the payment arrangement. They were able to cover the outstanding fees fully by April. By April, was it this year? Yeah. So it was all sorted and covered, and we have continuous discussions. They in quite a bind right now, but we're making sure that our 2021 distribution isn't impacted negatively by that. But we'll keep you posted on our socials and in our members' letters.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for the time. It's been a delight to talk to you. Part 1 of this discussion, and I know I'm going to be chatting to Karaba later in this week. Q, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Martin.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
Music has changed. How it makes us feel never will. The time is now to visit amstudios.co.za.